Ladies and gentlemen, take a moment to breathe deeply, to close your eyes if you wish, and to feel the stillness that surrounds you. In this silence, you will find the truth of this message. God says this is the end of your struggle. You see, the idea of struggle is something we have created. It is not a truth of the universe, it is a story we have told ourselves, a belief we hold that we must fight against the current of life. But the moment we stop and observe, we realize that the very nature of life is not about striving. Life is about being, existing, flowing. The struggle is an illusion we have constructed in our minds. Imagine for a moment that you are not a person fighting for survival, but a wave in the ocean. The wave does not struggle to rise, it simply arises naturally, part of the rhythm of the sea. It does not think, I must fight this tide, I must fight this storm. It simply is, rising, falling, ebbing, and flowing with grace. You are no different from that wave. You are the universe itself expressing itself through this form you call you. There is no separation. And yet we persist in thinking we are separate, that we must fight, that we must control, that we must struggle. But what if you were to realize that this struggle is not real? It is a product of your mind, not the truth of your existence. What if you could release this need to control everything, to constantly battle, to always feel as though you are fighting for your place in the world? The truth is that all of this struggle, all of this resistance is unnecessary. You don't need to fight for peace. You don't need to struggle for happiness. You don't need to strive to be whole, for you already are. Right now, in this very moment, you are already whole. The universe is not asking you to earn your place. It is inviting you to surrender, to let go of the belief that you must fight and struggle. Think of the very concept of time. We believe that our struggles have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But time itself is an illusion. The only thing that truly exists is the present moment. When you realize this, you understand that the end of your struggle is not something that happens in the future. It is here now. You have arrived at the end because you are already where you need to be. In this moment, the end of your struggle is here. It has always been here. The struggle ends when you realize that you are part of the vast, unbroken whole. You are not fighting against life, you are life. And life is not a battle, it is a dance, a symphony of moments that we flow through effortlessly when we stop resisting. God is not telling you that the end of your struggle is something that will happen someday. He is telling you that it is happening right now. The end is not in some distant future. It is here. You need only to cease the resistance and embrace what is. This is the end of your struggle because there is no struggle left to face. There is only life, in all its beauty and grace, inviting you to step into it fully, without hesitation, without fear, without doubt. You are not separate from this life. You are life itself flowing through this moment, and you are already everything you have ever sought. So release the idea of struggle. Release the belief that you must fight to survive. Embrace the simplicity of being. You are home. This is the end of your struggle. The illusion of struggle is something that deeply influences the way we perceive and interact with the world around us. We often live under the assumption that life is a fight, something that must be conquered, something to endure. From the moment we wake, the idea that we must work hard, face adversity, and overcome challenges is ingrained into us. But what if this struggle, this constant battle, is not an inherent truth of existence, but a perception we have chosen to adopt? What if the very idea of struggle is a mental construct, a story we tell ourselves that distorts the true nature of life? When we step back and observe the natural world, we see no evidence of struggle in the way we typically understand it. A flower does not strive to bloom, it simply opens in its own time. A river does not fight to find its path, it carves through the landscape with quiet persistence. The sun rises and sets without a hint of effort. Nature does not struggle. Everything is in a state of flow, unfolding according to its own inherent rhythm. And yet, in our human experience, we perceive life as a battlefield, full of obstacles, challenges, and burdens that must be confronted. The difference lies in how we engage with the world. The illusion of struggle arises from our belief in separation from the world, from others, from the very essence of life itself. We see ourselves as distinct individuals, disconnected from the flow of the universe, and in this disconnection we create the need to fight. We feel as though we must strive for everything, as if life is something that must be wrestled into shape. We fight for success, for love, for respect, for meaning, believing that without these things we will be incomplete. But in this striving we forget that we are already whole, already a part of the same unbroken flow that sustains everything in existence. The struggle comes not because life is inherently difficult, but because we think it is. We resist the flow, believing we must fight against it rather than surrendering to it. What if we let go of the need to control everything? What if we ceased believing that life was something to be conquered, that every challenge was a mountain to be scaled, every setback a defeat? If we allowed ourselves to simply be, without the constant pressure of striving, we might begin to see that the so-called struggles we face are only the result of our own resistance. We create the struggle by our attachment to outcomes, to expectations, and to the illusion that we are in control of the universe around us. The truth is that we are not separate from the flow of life, we are part of it. We do not need to fight for our place in the world, for we already belong to it. The more we try to force things to happen, the more we perpetuate the struggle. The illusion is further compounded by our perception of time. We imagine that there is a destination we must reach, a point where all our struggles will end. We think that once we have achieved a certain level of success, or once we have overcome a particular obstacle, we will be at peace. But peace is not something that arrives after a struggle. It is not a prize for those who endure. Peace is a state of being, available to us in every moment, if we only allow ourselves to experience it. The end of struggle is not something that happens in the future, it is here, now. The end of struggle is the recognition that there is nothing to fight against, nothing to overcome, because we are already complete as we are. Once we understand that struggle is an illusion, we can begin to live differently. We no longer need to fight against the flow of life, we can surrender to it, knowing that we are an integral part of the greater whole. In doing so, we begin to experience a profound sense of peace and ease. Life is not something to be fought for, but something to be embraced. When we cease resisting, we discover that we do not need to struggle to find our place in the world. We are already in it, exactly where we need to be. The struggle fades away not because we have won a victory, but because we have stopped believing in the fight. We let go, and in that release we find our true power. Resistance is one of the most subtle forces in our lives, often acting as an invisible barrier between us and the peace we seek. It is something we all experience, though we may not always recognize it for what it is. It appears in many forms: emotional, mental, physical, and manifests in both overt ways and subtle ones. Resistance, in its essence, is the refusal to accept life as it is, a constant tug against the natural flow of existence. It is an internal struggle, a force that emerges from the belief that things should be different from what they are. But what happens when we stop resisting, when we cease pushing against the tide of life? At its core, resistance is born from the illusion of separation. We believe we are separate from the world around us, that we must defend ourselves against it or control it in order to survive or succeed. We see ourselves as individuals in a world full of obstacles, and so we approach life with the mindset of a fighter, constantly striving, constantly battling to make things the way we want them to be. This belief in separation leads us to think that we must fight against what we don't want, whether it is a difficult situation, an unpleasant emotion, or an external circumstance. We cling to the notion that the world must bend to our will in order for us to feel comfortable, safe, or fulfilled. However, the more we resist, the more we reinforce the very tension and discomfort we are trying to avoid. Resistance creates friction, and friction creates suffering. When we resist something, we give it more power over us. This is particularly true when it comes to the emotional or mental struggles we face. Take, for example, the feeling of anxiety. When we resist the anxiety, when we fight against it or try to push it away, we only amplify it. The more we try to control it, the more it tightens its grip on us. But when we allow the anxiety to simply be, without judgment or resistance, it begins to dissipate. It loses its power because we are no longer feeding it with our energy. This is not to say that resistance is always an intentional choice. Often it arises unconsciously as a reflex to discomfort or uncertainty. We are conditioned from an early age to avoid pain, to reject what feels unpleasant, and to seek control over our lives. Our minds are wired to categorize experiences as either good or bad, and anything that falls into the bad category becomes something we resist. But what if we could break free from this conditioning? What if we could see discomfort, uncertainty, and even pain as integral parts of the human experience, not as threats to our well-being, but as opportunities for growth? Resistance is also closely tied to our attachment to outcomes. We become fixated on how things should be, according to our expectations or desires, and when reality does not align with these expectations, we resist it. This resistance can take many forms: frustration, anger, disappointment, fear. We resist the present moment because it is not what we want, and in doing so, we miss the richness of what is actually happening right in front of us. By attaching ourselves so firmly to how we think things should unfold, we close ourselves off to the possibilities that life offers in its raw, unfiltered form. When we let go of resistance, we create space for acceptance. Acceptance does not mean resignation. It does not mean giving up or giving in to things we don't want. It means recognizing that life is not something to be controlled, that we are not separate from it, and that our true power lies in our ability to flow with it rather than fight against it. Acceptance is the recognition that everything, even the most challenging or uncomfortable moments, is part of the grand tapestry of life. When we stop resisting, we stop fighting the natural flow, and in doing so, we align ourselves with the very essence of life itself. Resistance in all its forms arises from the illusion of control and the belief that we must constantly fight to maintain it. But when we realize that we are part of a much larger, interconnected whole, we see that resistance only separates us from the peace and freedom we seek. Life is not something to be controlled, it is something to be lived. When we release our need for resistance, we open ourselves up to the endless possibilities that exist in each moment. The struggle dissolves, and in its place there is only acceptance, flow, and the deep peace that comes from aligning with the natural rhythm of life. You are the universe expressing itself. This is a profound realization that, when truly understood, has the power to transform how we view ourselves and the world around us. For most of our lives, we operate under the assumption that we are separate individuals, distinct from the world and from everything else that exists. We believe we are isolated beings, each with our own story, and that life is something external to us that we must navigate. However, what if we could shift this perception and recognize that we are not separate from the universe, but are, in fact, an integral part of it? What if we could see that the universe is not something out there that we are observing, but something that is expressing itself through us? At our deepest level, there is no true separation between us and the cosmos. We are made of the same elements as the stars, the planets, and the very earth we stand on. The atoms in our bodies are the same atoms that make up everything around us. Our consciousness is not something distinct from the universe, but a part of the vast, intricate web of existence. Just as a wave in the ocean is not separate from the ocean, we are not separate from the universe. We are simply the universe experiencing itself through this form we call us. We are the eyes through which the universe sees itself, the hands through which it creates, the heart through which it feels. When we recognize that we are the universe expressing itself, everything changes. This realization invites us to let go of the notion that we are separate, struggling entities, and instead embrace the idea that we are interconnected with all things. Life is not something that happens to us, it is something that happens through us. We are not passive observers of existence, we are active participants in the unfolding of the universe. The thoughts we think, the actions we take, the choices we make, these are all the universe expressing itself through us. We are not merely living in the world, we are the world living. This understanding dissolves the illusion of limitation. We often see ourselves as small, insignificant beings in the vastness of the cosmos. But when we realize that we are the universe itself, that perception of smallness vanishes. We are part of something infinitely larger than ourselves, yet we are also the very expression of that infinity. There is no hierarchy between us and the stars, no separation between us and the trees or the oceans. Everything is interconnected, and we are part of this intricate living tapestry. We are not just in the universe is in us, and it is through us that it becomes aware of itself. This recognition also shifts our relationship to time. We often think of ourselves as individuals with a limited lifespan, striving to make our mark before time runs out. But when we realize that we are the universe expressing itself, we see that time is not something external that we are racing against. Time is an illusion, a construct of the mind. The universe is eternal, and so are we, for we are its expression. Our lives are but a fleeting moment in the grand unfolding of existence, yet they are an essential part of that unfolding. There is no need to fear time, for we are not separate from it, we are part of it, and time flows through us as it does through everything else in the universe. When we live with the awareness that we are the universe expressing itself, we also begin to live with a deeper sense of purpose. No longer do we need to search for meaning outside ourselves, for we are already part of the meaning of existence. Every moment, every breath, every experience is an opportunity to connect more deeply with the universe within us and around us. There is no need to seek fulfillment outside of ourselves because we already have everything we need. We are the universe, and in that recognition we find the peace, wisdom, and strength to move through life with grace. This perspective transforms how we interact with the world. When we see ourselves as the universe expressing itself, we realize that every other being, every plant, every animal, every person is also the universe in its own unique form. We are not separate from one another, we are all expressions of the same cosmic energy. This understanding invites us to live with greater compassion, understanding and respect for all forms of life. When we treat others with kindness, we are treating ourselves with kindness, for we are all the same energy manifesting in different ways. The realization that we are the universe expressing itself is not just an intellectual understanding, but a deep, experiential truth that can be felt in every fiber of our being. When we embrace this truth, we live with a profound sense of connection, peace, and purpose. We stop seeing ourselves as isolated individuals, and instead we recognize that we are the universe in action here to experience, create, and express the boundless beauty and wonder of existence. The concept of time is one of the most pervasive ideas in our lives, yet it is also one of the most elusive. We often think of time as something linear, something that moves forward from the past into the future, with a beginning and an end. This view of time shapes how we experience our lives, leading us to feel that there is always something ahead of us that we must reach, achieve, or accomplish. We measure time in hours, days, and years, and in doing so, we create a sense of urgency and pressure. We race against time, trying to make the most of it, yet time itself is something we cannot grasp, something that slips through our fingers the moment we try to hold on to it. But what if time is not as linear as we believe? What if it is not a relentless, ticking clock that we are powerless against, but something far more fluid, something that we are deeply connected to, something that exists in the present moment rather than in a past or future that we try to control? If we step back and consider time without the usual boundaries we place on it, we may begin to see that time is not the same for everyone or in every situation. Time, in its purest sense, is a human construct, an attempt to impose order on the chaos of experience. The way we perceive time is largely shaped by our awareness of change. We look at the world around us and notice that things evolve, things grow, things decay, and so we create this idea of time to measure these changes. The past is something we remember, the future is something we anticipate, and the present is the fleeting moment in which we exist. However, the present moment is the only reality we truly experience. The past and future are ideas, constructs that exist in our minds, but they do not exist outside of our awareness. When we focus too much on either, we miss the richness of the present, which is the only place where life truly unfolds. When we recognize that time is not something that happens to us, but something that we experience in every moment, we can begin to shift our relationship with it. We no longer need to live under the pressure of future outcomes, constantly anticipating what is to come or regretting what has passed. Instead, we can start to live fully in the now, to see time not as a line stretching endlessly forward, but as a series of moments that we can experience deeply and meaningfully. In this way, time becomes less about urgency and more about presence. We stop racing against the clock and start living in harmony with the rhythm of life. The illusion of time's linearity becomes even more apparent when we look at moments of pure presence. In these moments, time seems to dissolve entirely. When we are fully immersed in an experience, whether it is a creative act, a conversation, or simply being in nature, we often lose our sense of time. The hours may pass without our noticing, and yet we feel deeply connected to the present, as if the concept of time no longer matters. This is because time, in its purest form, is not measured by the clock, but by our awareness of the present moment. The concept of time is a mental construct that can either imprison us or liberate us. When we become overly attached to the idea that time is a limited resource, we begin to live in a state of constant anxiety, always worried about running out of it. But when we embrace the idea that time is not something to be controlled, but something to be experienced, we find that we are no longer bound by it. We can live fully in the present moment, free from the pressures of the past and the future. In this way, time becomes a dance rather than a race, a natural flow of moments that we move through, experiencing each one as it comes, without the need to control or measure it. Releasing control is one of the most profound and transformative acts we can experience in life. From the moment we are born, we are taught to control things: our environment, our emotions, our actions. We strive to shape the world around us to fit our desires and expectations, believing that by doing so we can ensure our happiness and safety. However, this constant need for control often leads to frustration, anxiety, and a sense of disconnection from the present moment. The more we try to control, the more we distance ourselves from the natural flow of life. The truth is that control is an illusion, and when we let go of it, we align ourselves with the very essence of existence. At the core of our desire to control is the fear of the unknown. We want to predict and manipulate the future because we feel safer when we think we can anticipate what will happen. We seek certainty, and in doing so, we become rigid and fearful of anything that lies beyond our control. Yet life is inherently uncertain. It is dynamic, constantly shifting and unfolding in ways we cannot always predict. By attempting to control it, we only create unnecessary tension and resistance. When we release control, we make space for life to flow naturally, without the constant interference of our anxieties or expectations. The need for control also stems from a deep-seated belief in separation. We believe that we are separate from the world, and that in order to thrive, we must exert our will over it. We think of ourselves as individuals who must struggle against forces beyond our control in order to survive. But in reality, we are not separate from the world, we are part of it. Everything is interconnected, and the more we try to control the world around us, the more we isolate ourselves from its natural rhythms. When we release control, we begin to recognize that we are part of something much larger than ourselves, and in that recognition we find peace. Releasing control does not mean becoming passive or resigned to whatever happens. It means surrendering the need to force outcomes or to control every detail of our lives. It means trusting that life will unfold in its own time and that we are exactly where we need to be, even if we do not fully understand why. It means allowing ourselves to be present with whatever is happening, without the need to resist or manipulate it. In this surrender, we find true freedom. We no longer feel the burden of trying to force life to match our expectations. Instead, we can embrace it as it is, knowing that whatever arises is part of our growth and evolution. When we let go of control, we also release the burden of perfectionism. We no longer need to be in control of every aspect of our lives to feel validated or worthy. Instead, we accept our imperfections and see them as part of the beauty of being human. We no longer judge ourselves for not living up to an ideal, but instead we embrace our authentic selves with all our flaws and uncertainties. It frees us from the exhausting cycle of striving and struggling to meet external standards. We are allowed to be ourselves, and in that freedom we find peace. Releasing control also allows us to tap into a deeper sense of creativity and intuition. When we are not bound by rigid expectations or fears of failure, we are free to explore, to experiment, and to express ourselves authentically. The need for control stifles creativity because it limits the possibilities of what can emerge. But when we let go of the need for certainty, we create the space for new ideas and fresh perspectives to flow into our lives. We become more open to the unknown and more willing to trust the process of creation. Releasing control is about trusting life. It is about recognizing that we are not separate from the world, but part of a larger interconnected whole. By letting go of our need to control, we align ourselves with the natural flow of existence. We stop fighting against the current and instead move with it. In doing so, we find a deeper sense of peace, freedom, and connection. Thanks for watching.